Hi, this is Mopar Greg from moparsforus.com. I thought we would go through a Mopar electronic distributors since there's a lot of questions about how they work and how you can change things in them to make them run better in your car. So we're going to start the assembly of this distributor right now. Well, the first thing I like to do is mark the block back here on the base of the distributor and mark the block itself with a little dot from a permanent marker or however you feel like doing it. That lets me put the distributor back in the engine just exactly where it came out. As long as the engine hasn't been turned over, it'll go right back where it belongs. Okay, the other thing I like to do is I like to mark the housing where the rotor is pointing, because you can get it here or you can get it here. Due to the little slotted shaft drive back here, it can only go in one way or the other, 180 across from each other. If you put it in 180 degrees off, then your timing and your firing order is going to be wrong, and your engine's not going to run. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is loosen this adjusting screw and get this back out of the way. Just adjust it as far back out of the way as it'll go, which I already have it set that way right now. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to pop out this reluctor. And I can use a Phillips screwdriver here because the things down inside there are already loose. And now once you start getting this reluctor off, there's something I want you to notice. If you look down inside the top of the reluctor, you'll see right there is a roll pin. Well, it's a really good idea to keep an eye on that roll pin and even mark the housing or mark the shaft right here where the pin is, because it needs to go back there and the pin will go into a slot down here on the shaft. You'll see when you move that reluctor up like that. Okay, so I'm going to turn the light off and I'm going to go ahead and remove that reluctor. And sometimes the pin stays in the reluctor and sometimes it doesn't. So it's a good idea, like I said, to mark it before you take it off. This one, the pin sticks in the reluctor. That's great. It can only go back on the shaft one way, and that's the right way. Okay. All right. Next thing I like to do is to take the screws out for the vacuum advance. That's just these two screws right here on each side of the vacuum advance. Okay. And then what you want to do is, if you look down inside here, right here, that pin is on the arm of the vacuum advance. That's what pulls this plate to make your timing advance when the vacuum advance pulls. What we want to do is we need to get that pin out of there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up on this assembly. It's kind of spring-loaded feeling, see there? I'm going to pull up on it and I'm going to wiggle the vacuum advance a little bit, and you'll see the pin slips right out of there. Okay, now once the pin is out, you just kind of have to hold up on this mechanism and just kind of gently work that out of there just like that. And of course it goes back in just the opposite. All right, now the next thing I want to note for you is I'll use the light again. No, we don't need it. Okay. There's a locating pin right there, and that goes through the housing and sticks out back here too. The vacuum advance actually locates on that pin right there in that hole. Right that hole right there. Okay. Some distributors have that pin and some don't. And it's not really a big deal. If you want to, you can use the back of a drill bit and put it through the vacuum advance bracket and through the housing and into here until you get this all put together and the screws for the vacuum advance tightened down. Then you can pull the drill bit out and everything will stay lined up. You don't have to, you can eye it, and it's pretty close because the screws keep it pretty close to where it's supposed to go anyway. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the screws out for the base plate and the advance mechanism. And I can't seem to get that one with my fingers. Yeah, got it. Okay. Okay. Then we'll take the pigtail out of the housing there. Get that out of the way. Now sometimes these advance plates are kind of hard to get out of there, but they just pry up. They just literally just pry out of there. So just gently kind of reach in there and work it out like that, and it'll come right out of there. Okay. Now there's that pin I was telling you about sticking up in the housing right there for locating that plate. All right. Now we're looking at the advance mechanism. Now what happens is when these weights start swinging out due to the RPMs of the distributor, as it's turning, it'll swing these weights out. And if you watch this section of the shaft, when I do that, when those weights swing out from higher RPMs, it'll advance the timing. See that center shaft moving? And that's at full advance right there. Now what people are talking about when they talk about limiting your total advance is to limit this slot. And there's a couple ways of doing that. I'll tell you in a second here. If you limit that slot, then it can't advance as much. Say, for example, it has to stop right there. That lets you run a high initial advance, like 14, 18 degrees, something like that. And then only add in another 24 degrees or so, 22 degrees. And that limits your total timing, so you don't go way too far and end up with getting really bad pinging under throttle. Okay, so down inside here, there's two ways of connecting this top shaft to this bottom shaft down here. One of them, they use a screw. It's a little Phillips screw with a couple of washers or two on it. And the other way, I'm getting ready to show you right now, is these little clips that look like this. Okay, it just sits in a slot on top of that shaft. Okay, and that retains this hat right here for the timing advance. Okay, so now I'm going to pull this off here so you can see underneath there. And it doesn't matter which way this goes, it can go either way. It's just the same idea as marking your distributor housing, because you can put this in backwards and your rotor will be 180 degrees off, but this will go in. But you can fix that if your housing's marked by just simply turning the distributor shaft. Turning the whole distributor before you put the distributor back in the motor to where it's pointing over there where you marked it. Okay, so we'll take that off. This is where the two advance springs go. You got a post right here on this weight, right there, and a post right here on that goes to the base plate. So you have a spring that goes between those two posts and between these two posts right here. Now what those springs do is limit how fast in the RPMs these weights swing out and how much. Okay, if you've got light springs, it'll swing all the way out really early in the RPMs. If you have heavy springs, you may not ever get the amount of advance you actually want, like from that garage door spring. That thing delays that total timing till way high in the RPMs, like 4,000, 5,000 RPMs, you might get maximum total timing. Now, I talked about this part right here, and what happens is some people will weld these slots up to keep those pins from moving all the way out to the ends of them. That limits your total mechanical timing. So like I said, for example, if you like to run a high amount of initial, but you don't want it to go up to 40 degrees of total timing, then you weld up these slots. The other way of doing it is a product from a company called FBO. Their website address is 4secondsflat.com. That's 4 as in the number 4 and then secondsflat.com, all lowercase. They sell a product called the timing limit plate. That's part number J685S, I believe. And what that does is it's just a round metal plate with different length slots cut in it that fit over these two posts right here. It just lays in there on top, fits over these two posts, and depending on which number you turn it to, you can vary your total timing limit. I don't remember exactly what the minimum and maximum are on it, but you can set it for whatever you want. If you want 18 degrees total mechanical, you just put the plate on where it says 18 degrees on the slots. Works great. Okay. Now, the other thing I would like to talk about real quick is the vacuum advance. Vacuum advance generally does not determine how much vacuum advance your distributor can move. Okay. It determines more when that advance can come in. So under light cylinder pressure, like light throttle situations, the cylinder pressure is lower. So we can start that fire in the cylinder sooner. So if you're cruising along with 2200 RPMs or something like that, your advance can is probably working. Okay. There's two different ways to connect these. One is to full manifold vacuum, and one is to ported manifold vacuum. And the difference really is that if you run full manifold vacuum on your vacuum canister, what'll happen is as soon as the engine starts, it pulls the maximum timing in. Okay. And that can work out for high compression engines that are hard to start and things like that. It can help that. Generally, vacuum advance is hooked to ported vacuum. So what happens is under light throttle situations, this will be pulling more advance to start that fire in the cylinder sooner. Okay. And then as you get more and more into the throttle, it'll be letting off on this, and it'll go all the way back to your mechanical total, whatever these determine. Okay. So they do make different numbers of these, and there's a number usually stamped on it right here somewhere, and that'll determine how much timing, but generally they pretty much only determine when the timing comes in. Okay, well, that's about it, you guys, except I got one little thing I'd like to tell you. You'll see this little pickup coil magnet right there. That is what the vanes on the rotor pass by to signal your ignition to fire. Okay, that little bar on that pickup will sense these little ridges right here. Okay, now that's an adjustable gap that's supposed to be adjusted at about 0.008 of an inch, and everybody agrees that you actually should use a brass feeler gauge for that, to set the gap on that. Problem is, I don't think I know anybody that has a brass feeler gauge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this back on here real quick, just lightly, and show you a little trick. Okay, now we want to set that gap right there using that screw. If this bar on the pickup coil is not parallel with the vane on this, I like to grab them right here with a pair of needle nose pliers, and I'll tweak that just a little bit to make them parallel with each other, because you don't really want a little gap at the bottom and a big gap at the top. Okay, it's nice if they're parallel with each other. Okay, now setting the gap on that, like I said, nobody I know uses or has a brass feeler gauge, but I'll tell you a little trick here. If you take a $1 bill and fold it in half, and you put a caliper on that, you'll see that we've got 0075. Okay, so that's 7.5 thousandths. That's plenty close. So what I do is I put the $1 bill in between these two pieces, and I line up the rotor vane with the pickup coil gap. So then I put that $1 bill in there, and then I adjust the pickup until they're tight, okay, between those 2 points in there. And then I'll tighten that screw down for the adjustment right there. My thumb's in the way, but you know where it is. And then if I can slide that dollar bill out like that, I've got a 7.5 to 8 thousandths gap, and it works perfect every time. Okay, so that's about it. I want to thank you guys for checking out my video. This is actually my very first serious video on YouTube, doing what I intend to do. Explain little things like this so that people that have never done it before, never seen them before, at the end, hopefully they know more about what they do and how to deal with them, and how things go together and all that good stuff. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Have a good day. And this is Greg from Mopars for Us signing off.